My daughter-in-law told her book club I was the kind of man who peaked in 1987 and hadn't noticed yet. She said it at our family Christmas dinner, loud enough for me to hear from the hallway where I was hanging up my coat. I'm Gordon Whitfield. No, wait, I should say I'm Allan Whitfield, 67 years old, and for the past 9 years I've let my son believe I was scraping by on a partial pension and whatever odd jobs I could find around Kelowna. What my son Trevor didn't know was that the small property management side business I'd mentioned once over the phone in 2016 had become Whitfield Land Holdings, a commercial real estate and property development company operating across British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario with 180 employees, a portfolio of 34 income-producing properties, and annual revenue sitting comfortably above $47 million. When my son and his wife sat me down last February to explain why I really ought to consider a power of attorney arrangement, for my own good, they said, I didn't argue. I just nodded and made 3 phone calls the next morning. If you're watching this, tell me where you're from, because this story is about what happens when your own family decides you've become inconvenient. Most people see exactly what my son Trevor sees when they look at me. A man in his late 60s who drives a 2009 Silverado with rust on the wheel wells and a cracked side mirror I keep meaning to replace. Someone who wears Costco fleece jackets and worn Blundstones that have been resoled once. I bring a 2-4 of Canadian to family dinners and always ask for decaf because I say caffeine keeps me up. I live alone in the house I built on a half-acre lot outside Kelowna. The same house I've lived in since 1994. The same house where Trevor grew up climbing the apple tree in the backyard and tracking mud onto the kitchen floor every single autumn for 18 years. Trevor is 38. An operations manager at a mid-sized logistics company in Calgary, pulling in somewhere around $130,000 a year. His wife Simone, 35, works as a senior associate at a wealth management firm downtown. She drives a black Audi Q7, has her nails done every 3 weeks, and has never once asked me how my week was going. Not once in 7 years of marriage to my son. The first sign something was shifting came about 14 months ago, around Thanksgiving. Trevor started referring to my property as the Kelowna asset in side conversations with Simone's father, a man named Philip, retired financial planner, the kind of man who wears driving loafers to a backyard barbecue and makes sure you know about it. Then the property became the acreage, then just your father's place, spoken with the same flat affect people use when they're discussing a problem that's already been categorized and filed. When the grandchildren are older, we'll want more room to spread out, Simone said over dinner one Sunday in November. Your father's lot is the right size. The location is ideal, walking distance to the lake path, easy highway access. She looked at Trevor. These things are easier to deal with before they become urgent. I was sitting 4 feet away. The second sign came in January. Simone started bringing a colleague to check on me. A woman from her office who apparently had a brother in residential property development. They walked through my house with that particular kind of careful politeness. That means they're actually measuring things in their heads. Her colleague stood in my living room and talked about ceiling heights and original hardwood and south-facing exposure like I wasn't standing in the kitchen doorway watching her do it. Simone called from the hallway. Don't mind us, Allan. We're just helping you think through your options. My options. In my own house. What none of them knew was that I had built that house with cash I earned from selling my first property management company in 1993. What none of them knew was that every other Tuesday, I drove that rusted Silverado to my regional office in Kelowna's business district, where 11 people reported directly to me, and that I sat on a video call every Thursday morning with my CFO and 2 regional directors. What none of them knew was that the stack of folders in my spare bedroom wasn't tax records from 15 years ago. It was the current development file for a mixed-use project in Langford I was considering adding to the portfolio. But the real turning point came in late March, when Trevor and Simone brought her parents over for what they called a family planning conversation, Philip and his wife Louise. Philip sold his financial planning practice for a decent sum 8 years ago and has spent the time since treating that transaction like a personality. Louise volunteers at their condo association and somehow manages to work it into every third sentence. They came into my home the way people walk into an open house, scanning the baseboards, glancing at the ceiling, making small sounds of polite concern. Philip pointed at a water stain near the window above the back door. That'll be a flashing issue. These older builds, they start to go around the roof joints. You're probably looking at real money if it's been leaking into the wall cavity. I built that house. I know where every pipe runs. The stain was from a single incident in 2018, when a contractor I hired to repoint the chimney missed a step. I had it fixed the following week. The wall cavity was dry. Simone was taking notes on her phone. Trevor nodded, the way he nods when he's decided Philip is correct about something. Dad, Philip's suggesting we get someone in to do a proper assessment. Just understand what you're dealing with before things get complicated. Before what gets complicated. Louise set down her tea. Allan, you're not getting any younger. These decisions are much easier when they're made thoughtfully, before something happens and everyone's scrambling. Thoughtfully, as if I were a file that had been sitting in someone's pending tray too long. Philip leaned forward. Have you looked into retirement communities at all? There's a very well-reviewed place in West Kelowna, independent living they call it, meals, activities, a shuttle to the medical clinic on Tuesdays. I am 67 years old. I cross-country ski every winter. I replaced my own hot water tank 14 months ago, and I do my own taxes by hand, because I don't trust software with anything I care about. And this man was suggesting a shuttle to the clinic. Trevor stepped in carefully. What we're trying to say, Dad, is that you shouldn't have to carry all of this alone. Simone and I have been looking at the next few years. We want to be closer to the lake. Something with room for the kids to grow. This lot, this location, it's exactly what we've been looking for. And it would solve two problems at once. And where would I go? They exchanged a look I recognized. Rehearsed. There's a community in Peachland, Simone said. New build. Suites starting around $20 a month, but some of the smaller units are $1,800. With your CPP and OAS and whatever you've set aside, you'd be comfortable. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or property taxes. You could just relax. Whatever I'd set aside. Philip clasped his hands. Allan, I want to be direct with you. This property, in this market, is worth somewhere between $900,000 and $1.1 million. That's significant equity for someone in your circumstances. A private family sale at a fair value, maybe a modest family discount, gives Trevor and Simone a foundation, gives you liquidity, and removes the stress of home ownership at a stage of life where you should be simplifying. Louise nodded. You done your part, Allan. You raised Trevor. You built this. There's no shame in letting the next generation carry it forward. I wanted to tell them about the commercial building I'd acquired in Burnaby the previous spring, about the trust accounts, about the 180 people who show up to jobs because of decisions I make. But I didn't. I said I'd think about it, thank them for coming, and walked them to the door. That night, I sat on my back deck where I used to help Trevor practice his slap shot against the fence. I thought about the son I'd raised, the one who'd never once asked what Whitfield Land Holdings actually did, despite having seen the name on paperwork at my desk for years, the one who'd assumed the worn fleece meant empty pockets, rather than a man who had simply stopped caring what people thought of his clothes sometime around 2003. The email arrived Thursday morning at 6:48. Subject, Dad. Next steps on the Kelowna property. Allan, Simone, and I met with a solicitor this week. Given that you're living alone and the property represents a significant illiquid asset, there are some real planning advantages to a transfer sooner rather than later. Here's what we're proposing. You agree to list the property as a private family sale, priced at $820,000, a fair discount given the relationship. We'll structure a right of occupancy clause allowing you to remain in the house for up to 12 months while you secure alternative housing. Philip's firm can assist with managing the proceeds, and we can look at how best to supplement your income going forward. We'd like to start the paperwork before the end of April, 12 months. In the house I built. I called Trevor immediately. Dad, did you read the whole thing? I read it. Good. Then you understand we're trying to get ahead of this before it becomes a situation. It's already a situation, Trevor. His voice shifted into the careful level register people use with someone they've decided needs to be managed. Dad, you're house rich and cash poor. That's the reality. Simone and I can't just watch you sit on $1 million in equity while you're worrying about utility bills. I haven't worried about a utility bill since 2004. But I didn't say that. What I said was, what if I don't want to sell? There was a pause. Then we'd have to look at other options. Philip knows a lawyer who specializes in, he paused, family estate situations, capacity assessments, that kind of thing. We'd rather not go that route. But if you're not able to make rational decisions about your own finances, there are legal mechanisms to make sure you're protected. He hung up. I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd made Trevor scrambled eggs every Saturday morning for the better part of a decade, and understood clearly that my son had genuinely convinced himself he was doing me a favor. The documents arrived by courier the following Monday. They were from a downtown Calgary firm. The language was designed to sound caring: voluntary asset transition agreement, family estate optimization plan, residential transition support framework. There was a breakdown of my estimated monthly expenses based on average fixed-income seniors in the Okanagan. According to their numbers, I was barely covering property taxes and groceries. The final paragraph stated that this arrangement would allow Allan Whitfield to transition into appropriate retirement housing while preserving the family asset for future generations. I walked to my home office. I opened the locked cabinet behind the filing shelves. Corporate registration documents for Whitfield Land Holdings, incorporated in 2009. Financial statements showing $47.3 million in annual revenue. A current bank statement from RBC showing liquid holdings of $18.6 million across operating and personal accounts. A profile from Business in Vancouver magazine published 2 years ago, calling me one of the quieter forces in BC commercial property. I laid it all on the desk and made 3 calls. First call, my solicitor, a woman named Daisy Obi, who has handled every Whitfield Land Holdings transaction for 11 years. Days, I need some documents prepared. My son is attempting to acquire my personal residence under the assumption that I'm a fixed-income senior with no legal resources. She was quiet for a moment. What kind of documents? The kind that correct that assumption. And I need everything ironclad. They have a lawyer. Consider it already started. Second call, my CFO, a man named Stuart Park. Stuart, I need you to pull every contract, service agreement, or financial relationship Whitfield has with any entity connected to a man named Philip or his former practice, and anything connected to the wealth management firm where my daughter-in-law works. He called back in 20 minutes. Allan, this is interesting. Simone's firm, Meridian Wealth Partners, manages the RRSP accounts for 2 of our senior property managers. We set that up through a corporate group plan 3 years ago. Combined AUM we're contributing to is around $340,000. Transfer all 3 accounts to a different provider, quietly and with proper notice. Administrative restructuring, no drama. That'll raise some eyebrows on their end, I know. Third call was harder. I called my brother in Kelowna, a man who has known Trevor since the boy was in diapers. He didn't say much. He just listened. When I finished, he said, "Allan, are you doing okay? Not the company. You." I told him I didn't know yet. That was the truth. What happened next came from Trevor's side, not mine. Simone organized a dinner. Not at a restaurant, at their place in Calgary. 40-minute flight from Kelowna. 14 people around a table that cost more than my first car. Her parents, their friends from the neighborhood, Trevor's colleagues from work, 2 couples from Simone's firm including her managing director, a man named Conrad, The occasion was officially to celebrate Trevor's promotion to Senior Operations Director, but I knew from the way Simone had described it on the phone, very casually, very quickly, that this was also a moment, a setting, a stage. I flew down. I wore a clean flannel shirt and the dark slacks I keep for funerals and flights. Took a cab from the airport. Conrad was the first person to find me interesting. He shook my hand near the kitchen island, and when Simone explained that I was Trevor's father from Kelowna, he asked what I did. Property mostly, I said. Bit of this, bit of that. Retired, more or less. Philip appeared at my elbow almost immediately. Allan does maintenance work, he said to the group. Residential, keeps him active. Good for the mind at that age. I didn't correct him. Trevor made a small speech about his promotion. It was a good speech, actually. He's always been a good speaker. I felt proud of him for about 30 seconds, until Simone stood up and added her own remarks, which somehow circled around to the family's exciting next chapter, the plans taking shape for a home that would finally give them the space and roots they deserved, and how grateful they were to have family support in making it possible. Everyone looked at me warmly. Conrad raised a glass. To family. I didn't raise mine. Trevor noticed. Dad, aren't you happy for us? I looked at him across the table. I looked at Simone. I looked at Philip, who was already refilling his wine like the matter was settled. I looked at Conrad, who was smiling at me with the particular smile of a man who's decided I'm a pleasant and manageable variable in someone else's story. I have a question, I said. It came out quieter than I intended, but the table got quieter to match it. Trevor, do you know which firm handles the group retirement accounts for Whitfield Land Holdings employees? He frowned. What? Dad, what are you talking about? I'm asking if you know the name of the company managing nearly $340,000 in retirement savings on behalf of 3 of my senior staff. Simone's expression shifted slightly. She knew where I was going before the others did. I could see it. Conrad looked between us. Whitfield Land Holdings? That's my company, I said. I founded it in 2009. We currently manage 34 income-producing properties across BC, Alberta, and Ontario. Annual revenue is $47 million. The managing firm for those employee accounts was Meridian Wealth Partners, which is Simone's firm. As of last week, those accounts have been transferred elsewhere for administrative reasons. Simone set down her fork. Conrad looked at her. Meridian? Those were corporate accounts? I kept going. The second thing. Trevor, the promotion you've just been celebrating. Congratulations. Genuinely. Your new role involves oversight of third-party service contracts for your logistics company. I believe one of those contracts, a warehousing and facilities agreement in the Lower Mainland, runs through a property I own in Burnaby. That lease comes up for renewal in June. We'll be reviewing all our tenant terms in the next 60 days. That's not... Trevor stopped. Dad. That's not possible. I opened my phone and showed him the property registry listing. Whitfield Land Holdings. Registered owner. His company's address on the lease. The table had gone very still. Philip cleared his throat. Allan, I think there may be some misunderstanding here. We were simply trying to help with your planning. You had your son prepare legal documents, threatening me with a capacity assessment if I didn't sell my house at a family discount. You walked through my home like it was already yours. You told a room full of people I was a retired handyman who did maintenance work. I'm 67, not 87, and I have never, not once, asked you for help with anything. Louise reached for Philip's arm. I looked at Trevor. I'm not interested in taking anything from you. I'm not restructuring leases out of spite. But I need you to understand what you were doing. You looked at your father and saw a liability. You decided I couldn't manage my own life. And instead of asking me anything, you called lawyers and started writing transfer agreements. You let Philip speak for me in rooms I wasn't in. You let your wife plan my next 12 months without once picking up the phone to ask how I was doing. His face was doing something I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. Something between anger and the beginning of shame. The house is mine, I said. It has been since 1994, and as of 3 weeks ago, the title has been moved into a family trust that I control outright. There's nothing to transfer and no agreement to sign. Conrad said something quietly to Simone. She looked at the table. I picked up my jacket. I'm flying home tonight. Trevor, call me when you want to have a real conversation. Not about the property. About anything else. I'm interested in those conversations. I've always been interested in those. I took a cab back to the airport. The weeks that followed were harder than I'd expected. The lease review in Burnaby went forward, and when Trevor's company received the renewal terms, modest increase, standard market adjustment, there were questions asked internally about how a logistics manager's father came to be the landlord of one of their facilities. Trevor was not fired, but he was moved sideways, and he understood what that meant. Simone lost the 3 corporate accounts formally. It was a small number for Meridian, but Conrad made certain she understood that client management was part of her performance file. Philip stopped calling. 6 weeks after the dinner in Calgary, Trevor drove to Kelowna on a Saturday. Alone. No Simone, no children, no agenda that I could see. He knocked on the door at 10 in the morning, which meant he'd left before sunrise. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd helped him with his grade 11 math 30 years ago. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, I didn't know about the company. I want you to know that I genuinely didn't know. I believe you, but I knew you weren't struggling. He looked at the table. I think I knew. The house is paid off. You've never asked me for anything. You've always had enough. I think I just let Simone and Philip talk me into a version of you that was easier to manage, because if you were fine, then what we were doing was just wrong. And I didn't want it to be wrong. I let that sit between us for a moment. It was wrong, I said, not because of the money. Because you stopped seeing me as a person with his own mind and started seeing me as a file to be organized. He nodded. He looked tired. I don't know how to fix it. You start by not trying to fix it all at once, I said. You come on Saturday. You drink the coffee. You ask me how the week was. You tell me how yours was. We do that for a while and see where it goes. He looked up. That's it? That's where it starts. He stayed for 4 hours. We walked the property. I showed him the apple tree had a split in the main trunk I'd been watching. Probably needs to come down next spring. He helped me stack the last of the firewood I'd had delivered in October. We didn't talk about Simone. We didn't talk about Philip. We talked about the Canucks, who were having another year that tested a person's loyalty. We talked about his kids, my grandchildren, who I hadn't seen since Christmas and missed in the specific, aching way that only grandfathers understand. When he left, he hugged me at the door. Real hug. Both arms. The kind he used to give me when he was small enough that I could lift him off the ground. Sundays, he said. I'll call Sundays, if that works. That works fine, I said. After his truck disappeared down the road, I went back inside and sat in the kitchen for a long time. I thought about Simone, who had sent a short message to Trevor's phone that morning. 6 sentences, no excuses, just an acknowledgement that she had been dismissive and unkind, and that she hoped in time I might be willing to have a conversation. I wasn't there yet, but I was keeping the message. 2 weeks later, my office manager brought me a piece of paper with a note from Trevor. He'd applied for a position at a property management company in the Okanagan. Entry level, project coordinator. Less money than Calgary, but closer to home. He'd included a line at the bottom of his cover letter that I don't think he intended me to see. A note to himself, maybe, or the beginning of something he was still working out, learning what things actually take. I didn't pull any strings. I gave the company owner's name to my office manager and asked her to say nothing. 3 weeks later, Trevor called on a Sunday, as he'd said he would. He'd gotten the interview. "Good," I said. "I'm nervous. You should be. It's worth being nervous about things that matter." He got the job. He and Simone moved to Vernon in May, 40 minutes from Kelowna. It's not a reconciliation wrapped in a bow. There are still Sunday calls where we run out of things to say after 20 minutes. Still moments when I see Simone at the door, and we're both careful with each other in ways that haven't fully softened yet. But my granddaughter fell asleep on my couch last month during a Canucks game, and my grandson helped me water the tomatoes I planted along the south fence. And those things count for more than I can say, simply. I still drive the Silverado. The side mirror is still cracked. I keep meaning to fix it, but honestly I've gotten used to checking the blind spot the old-fashioned way. And there's something about leaving it that I've decided I'm not ready to let go of. Some people spend a lot of energy making sure the world knows what they've built. They need the car to say it, the address to say it, the watch, the jacket, the table they book at restaurants they can't quite afford. I understand the impulse. I had it once, when I was younger and hadn't yet realized that the people whose opinion actually matters to you don't need to be convinced of anything. My son is learning that now. Slower than I'd like, and in a harder way than I'd have chosen for him. But he's learning it on his own terms, which is the only way it sticks. That's worth more than any property transfer agreement. That's worth more than all of it.